Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
All right, welcome back to the podcast team. Today we're going to talk about bike fitting with Matt.
We are Sans Ev today.
Sans Ev, so that means we can get deep into bike fit geekery. And today's going to be a good one, I think, because we're going to talk about a not so talked about technique that we use in our bike fitting on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's very effective, but it doesn't get talked about that much. And certainly I haven't heard that many other bike fitters talking about it, but I do know, obviously, other bike fitters do use this technique and it is very effective. And we learnt it from other bike fitters. But I also think that this plays into your skill set, Matt.
Well, my former skill set.
Your former skill set. Former skill set? Former skill set. And I think this is a really useful tool, if you're aware of it, for you to go out there, assess your own bike position. And I think also it will be particularly relevant now, since we are in 2024 in autumn time going into winter and people are transitioning to that indoor training environment. The winter bike is dead.
RIP the winter bike. Yeah. But what you said was quite interesting. It is a tool that anyone and everyone can use.
Yeah. And
well,
people
within reason.
I think people who are listening to this podcast are certainly interested in assessing their own bike fit. They're interested in finding out how to better their bike fits. And this is a free and easy tool that anyone can just pick up and use. You can't really argue with it. The results are usually pretty black and white. You just need to know how to tap into it. And this falls into a bigger kind of skill set which you can tap into also, which is critically important in being able to assess any bike fit and, you know, how well you are performing. And it, you know, you don't need a power meter, you don't need some extra sensor or angle measurement tool. This is an internal measurement system which everybody has. You just need to be able to tap into it. So, without kind of
giving that a right build up,
no, without building it up anymore, let's get into it. So today we're going to talk about listening, sound, music,
using your lug holes.
I thought I was doing quite a good job of making it sound attractive.
We're calling a spade, aren't we?
All right, team, use your lug holes, or if you don't know what that means, use your ears. We had a fit today, didn't we? A couple of fits where it was pretty apparent just by listening to the sound of pedaling that we could assess that something got better. So
it's instantaneous feedback if you are listening for it.
Yeah. Well, do you want to tell the listeners kind of some of the things that we listen out for?
So this first sort of came to my attention, at least, when we were in our old studio in Cloud9 in Bloomsbury. Yeah. We had a visit from a legend of bike fitting.
Oh,
Happy Friedman.
There he is,
the legend himself.
Yeah, he just turned up.
He just rocked up. I think he was in town. I don't think he was in town for maybe.
I think he went to see Jules.
No, he went to see Jules, and then they were going to, I think, the conference in Denmark, the Cycling Science Conference,
right, yeah,
I think, where Happy was maybe speaking, or Jules was speaking, or something. But anyway, we were graced with the man's presence himself, Happy Friedman, who, if you are not aware, is one of the original bike fitting kind of legends, if you like.
Pioneers,
yeah. Based in New York.
Yeah, New York City.
New York City. And yeah, he was gracious enough to come and see us in our old studio. And I think I was working with a client. Yeah, I think I was working with a client on, just kind of going through our kind of process, explaining this, that, and the other. I think we had a little alcove in our old studio where you can't actually see what's going on the trainer at that time. So it's kind of was like a really long, narrow studio with a little kind of like alcove at the end of it.
Like a dog leg.
Yeah, like a dog leg. With that, that's where we set the table up and the coffee machine. So people tend to hang out around the coffee machine. Yeah. And all of a sudden, Happy Friedman turns round and he just comes over and just gives me a set of basically 3 instructions.
What did he say?
You what? He basically said, told me to do something with the cranks, something with the handlebar width, and then obviously adjust the seat height accordingly, or the saddle position, accordingly. And I was like, all right, let's do this then. And lo and behold, everything just kind of fell into place for this rider that we were working with. And I was a bit kind of taken aback by it. I was just like, how on earth have you figured that out? Because you've been hanging out around the corner. And then it clicked. He was listening to the sound of the pedal stroke, the sound of the bike, the sound of the trainer, that this rider was kind of, while this rider was pedaling on their bike. And he knew what needed to happen based on the sound that this rider was making and the way that they were interacting with their bike. And that for me kind of like the penny dropped. I was like, oh, this is another way of assessing how a rider is interacting with their bike that I hadn't thought of until that point.
Yeah.
I was like, it kind of blew my tiny little mind, really. And I was like, oh yeah, my ears are pretty decent, or they were.
As a former musician.
Well, trombone player, not a musician. There's a joke, because like drummers and trombone players, not real musicians. But yeah.
You got paid for your craft.
I did get paid to make noise out of a metal tube at one point in my life. So, but it's another way that you can assess the interaction that a rider is making with a bike, but not just for a fitter. You can assess your own interaction with the bike based on listening to the sound that your bike, the trainer, if you're riding indoors, is making. So it's a very valuable sensory kind of feedback loop, if you like. That just gives you another data point or kind of way of assessing how you are interacting with your bike.
Yeah, because it will happen, despite all the quietening, dampening features that people search for in their turbo trainers, trying not to piss off their neighbours.
Well, you got to take your headphones out.
Yeah.
For a start. So get out of your podcasts, apart from this one, obviously. Get out of your music and listen to how you are interacting with your bicycle.
There's a time and a place. You want to be aware of how you're pedaling, aware of what's going on. Is your body happy? Is it not? Then listening. It's not difficult to do. The trainer always makes noise, and you're always pushing down with one leg and followed by the other. There's always a clear feedback loop. There's always some clear noise coming back, and it's always pretty clear there's one leg followed by another.
So I guess the question now would be, what is it that we're listening for, and how can we use that feedback to improve our riding?
Yeah. If we think about a good bike fit or well-fitted rider, what kind of things are we looking for? We're looking for smooth pedaling, controlled pedaling, continuous motion. If you think about an athlete, or if you think about an athlete that you admire, they have honed their craft, so they feel they make it look effortless. So people talk about flow, don't they? But making hard things look effortless. But hard things can also sound effortless, I think, if you get it right. So there's a smooth movement, smooth interaction. There's not choppiness. You're not stabbing at the pedals and making the bike creak from one side to the other. You're not fighting the machine. So all of these analogies we use, like fighting the machine or yanking on the pedals, yanking on the handlebars, it describes an interaction where you're not kind of bonding with your machine.
Yeah, you're not riding with mechanical sympathy or souplesse.
There you go. Why didn't you just say that?
I was waiting for you to bumble through it.
Stop your waffling.
I just thought I'd give you another couple of minutes to see where you got to, and then I'll rescue you.
Yeah. Souplesse, smoothness.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we're looking for control, we're looking for smoothness, we're looking for that effortless motion through your pedal stroke. And quite often we'll hear an asymmetric pedal stroke. Each side of your body operates differently. Are you right-handed or are you left-handed? If you are one side dominant, then it's very difficult to change that. You're always going to be one side dominant. Do you have a significant difference between one side and the other? And often you can tell that through listening to how you interact, how you push through that kind of pedal stroke, particularly if you hear big acceleration through the pedal stroke on one side, or even just the volume of sound. Like if you push a lot through one side and not the other, then that pedal stroke on one side, you'll hear big whir on the turbo
it's kind of an
trainer.
acceleration as you kind of push through the pedal stroke, and then the pitch of the sound will increase. And the bike doesn't care that you're asymmetrical.
No. Yeah.
Effectively, you want to be doing the exact same thing on both legs.
Yeah.
But we know, as a human, that perfect symmetry doesn't exist.
Yeah. We are not robots, as we often say. The bike is symmetrical. We are not. And so we're not aiming to be completely symmetrical. But we want to be aware of where the differences are and aware of maybe where we can make improvements. So all of this awareness and assessment is looking for opportunities to be better, to improve our riding, to improve that interaction between us and our bikes so that we can become better cyclists, so that we can enjoy our ride, because we do want to ride our bikes.
And we kind of want to enjoy it because we don't get paid to suffer, so we may as well be into it.
And I think this is some of this is lost in indoor training, where I feel like it's so much about just smashing the pedals, generating the power numbers, seeing how you can beat your mates on Zwift or whatever it is.
No, mate, it's people are divorced from their bodies, and the only feedback we get is through the medium of a Garmin. And there is other ways.
Yeah. But then quite a lot of people these days have left-right power balance. They've got these tools, which they're always looking at and trying to use in some kind of way. Maybe this is a way of using your tool, but also using your own sensory data, your own ears, to correlate some of what you see on the screen with how you feel on the bike and what is actually happening through your pedal stroke.
Yeah. That's another calibration point. Is your power meter spinning you a yarn?
Actually, we had a conversation today, didn't we?
We did.
About power meters, and this gentleman was clearly an asymmetric creature because he had certain injuries, multiple injuries, one side to the other. But he was very pleased because he had a pretty balanced power balance from one side to the other, and he was pretty pleased with that.
But when we listened to it, was it balanced? No, it was not.
So the way in which you generate power can be very different from one leg to the other. So you can generate the same power number, but how you get there can be very, very different. So your power meter doesn't tell you everything, and if you pay attention to just little things like listening to the pedal stroke, how smooth it is it the same one side to the other, then actually you can make some pretty significant assessments yourself on how you are performing. And using your power data to figure out, what does this mean? I'm creating the same power on each side, but I'm recruiting different muscles. I'm moving in a different way. And so does that matter to me? Does it matter that I'm using different muscles? If you're really far out and you're, say, just using your quad muscles on one leg and you're using just your hamstrings on the other side, then at some point that asymmetry is going to catch up with you, and it is going to cause overload on a certain muscle group rather than spreading that kind of load out, and you're going to end up with an injury. So this is where actually paying attention and digging a little bit deeper than just pure numbers can really help you stay healthy as a cyclist, get better performance for the long run.
So if we use this particular fit as a almost case study, we can sort of walk people through how you used your ears to kind of get this gentleman to a better, more balanced position. So I guess the first thing for context would be that we already knew this chap. He'd already been for a fit with us before. So this was a new bike that was a recent acquisition. So it's the same geometry as his previous bike. But yeah, I guess sort of, giving a bit of context about how we used our ears in conjunction with all the other stuff that we do to assess a position, just to give our listenership some kind of pointers and clues as to how they can maybe use their ears to assess their own position and how they're moving, and what we ended up, or the interventions we ended up employing based on our feedback of what we heard from the start of the session to the end of the session.
Yeah. So first of all, without even listening to his pedal stroke, it was pretty clear his saddle was too high.
Yeah.
So he got the new bike, handlebars were pretty much in the same place, but he'd had his saddle set up by someone else, even though they had the fit data.
That's a story for another day. Let's keep it
a little bit too high.
Yeah.
And so if we listen
3
to
centimetres too high.
Yeah. 3 centimetres too high. But this meant that he wasn't able to fully connect through the bottom of the pedal stroke. He had to overcompensate. He had to stretch his leg out, stretch his foot out, overextend. And so he wasn't getting good purchase and power production all the way through the pedal stroke. So usually, as an ideal, we want to be able to push power from all the way from the top dead center of the pedal stroke, or even just before, push down all the way through 3 o'clock, down through the bottom of the pedal stroke till 6 o'clock, if we imagine our pedal stroke as a clock face. And ideally almost kind of pull back through the bottom of the pedal stroke. So we're maximizing that full power production in the pedal stroke. And in order to do this, then you need good contact with the pedal, with the shoe, with the foot, with the leg, all the way through that almost 180 degrees of pedal stroke.
Well, it starts at the hip, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And works its way down from there. But yeah, absolutely. If you haven't got that connection right the way through to the bottom of the pedal stroke, and you can't feel your foot in the bottom of the shoe and have that proprioception right the way from metatarsal heads, toes, all the way back through your heel, then there's going to be something amiss.
Yeah. And so if you're losing something there, then your body will automatically compensate. You'll find ways of just staying within the pedal stroke, within that seat height that you've set up. But a really obvious way that you can tell that you're sat a little bit too high is if the pedal stroke almost starts off sounding strong, but it tapers off as you get towards the bottom of the pedal stroke, then you're clearly losing that connection. You're clearly losing that power through the pedal stroke. And so you can hear it just in the volume of like pedaling.
And it will sound choppy.
Yeah.
Like you're kind of just,
Yeah. So much is happening in that. You may be dropping your hip or pointing your toes, and you can't keep that continuous, smooth power production all the way around the pedal stroke. And smoothness does come from the pushing. We talk about creating power in the pedal stroke by pushing down. Never pull up. If you want to learn about pulling up or not pulling up, listen to our pedal episode that we talked about. Maybe try out some flat pedals. But yeah, anyway, don't pull up on your pedal stroke. You're always pushing down. But this real smoothness, that continuous sound of the turbo trainer comes from getting the right connection where one leg can push down, and as that leg finishes pushing down, the other one is initiating the pedal stroke. So that's where you can really tell that you've got like saddle and seat position and function of your legs just right, when everything sounds really smooth and connected. But if you're starting to hear some staccato, some kind of stabbing, some slight asymmetry in that sound, then something's a little bit off. And so in this case, there was, well, we knew that this rider had a significant leg length difference, significant injury on one side over the other, a significant lean into one side over the other. So it was pretty obvious that, you know, one leg was being carried along. So, you know, he really favors his right leg. And so that, both visually, his right foot stays much flatter through the pedal stroke. His knee and hip and foot stay much more aligned in the pedal stroke from like a frontal plane if you're looking straight on. The sound of his pedal stroke is smooth on the right hand side, it's more continuous, it's more controlled. Left hand side, you know, his knee waves out, his hip kind of waves out to the side, his foot is much more pointed, and the pedal stroke sounds super choppy.
But this was the interesting thing, is it still sounded like that when the saddle was positioned in the right place.
Yeah.
It was less,
yeah,
but it was still an audible difference between the left and the right leg.
Yeah. So he does have a significant leg length difference in his left leg being shorter. So he had some shims underneath his shoe. But the visual giveaway is that his foot still stayed at quite a toe-down pedaling position all the way through the pedal stroke, even as we kind of move the saddle up and down. So there's definitely something going on in the function of that foot which keeps it at a kind of toe-down pedaling position. And that's with like cleats all the way back and saddle in the right place and so on. And yeah, just try it out on the trainer next time you're on your trainer. See what happens to the sound of your pedaling as you change the angle of your foot. So try and pedal with more heel down, try and pedal with your toes all the way down. Just see what happens, and see what it feels like as well. But I'm sure you'll notice quite a difference in how your foot functions or how your pedal stroke feels. So yeah, what did this tell us?
So it told us that the left side, although better than it was when it started, was still effectively more of a quad dominant pedal stroke. And by that we mean it was slightly more choppy and had that acceleration and deceleration quality, that crescendo and diminuendo kind of quality compared to the right leg, which was a lot smoother and a lot more controlled throughout.
Yeah. So we can tell some of that because your quads tend to enable you to push down on the pedal stroke very easily. It's the main driving kind of big muscle pushing down. So most cyclists will have pretty well developed quads, I'd say. So cycling is a pretty quad dominant kind of activity. It can be anyway.
Yeah.
Like
that's a story for another day, but yeah.
It favours quad activity. But if you want to be able to, like, beyond 3 o'clock, push through the back end of the pedal stroke, so from 3 o'clock down to 6 o'clock and back a little bit, you have to be able to engage hamstrings, which are the reciprocal muscle of the quads. So quads being front of your leg, hamstrings back of your leg. So you have to be able to engage those muscles. So if you're a little bit too high, you can't access those hamstrings, or they're already too stretched out, you're pointing your toes down, hamstrings are kind of a little bit too shortened, then you just can't get that activation that you need to kind of pull through the bottom of the pedal stroke. Where does this leave us?
So this leaves us with a slightly more quad dominant strategy, if you like, of producing force on that left leg, whereas the posterior chain was a bit more active on the right side.
Yeah.
So what we kind of worked out from this is that we needed some sort of intervention to try and coax the posterior chain on the left side into a bit more kind of like engagement and into action, if you like, to get a bit more balance from this very quad dominant strategy that this rider had on the left side. Yeah. Now, the other thing that this does as well is it helps create stability on the bike. Mm-hmm. So if you can't access your glutes, you're missing out on a lot of power, because your glute max, biggest muscle in your body, very good at generating power, and kind of is a complementary kind of muscle complex to your quads in generating force and stability. But if you can't access your glutes, and specifically glute medius, then you're reducing the amount of stability that you can generate through your feet on the pedal. So what we figured out was we had to try and get this left glute complex activated somehow for this rider.
Yeah. And you can try this out at home as well. If you squat, you've heard us talking about squatting before. Like if you squat on your tiptoes, all you can feel is like quads activating and so on. It's very difficult to get any of that posterior chain, so all the muscles on the back of your legs, so hamstrings, glutes active. But if you can get your heel and your forefoot and your foot flat on the floor and sit back into your squat, then you can start getting the whole chain of muscles working. And this is generally what we want to try and find with most riders. We talked about cycling being a relatively quad-driven activity, but actually we can, or we want to, try and get all the big leg muscles involved. So glutes, hamstrings, quads, calves, all of them working together so that you're not overloading one set. Because if you overload one set, then you're just not going to be able to do as much. We could feel this as well. Like it's quite interesting. You can just, another aside, you can kind of assess which muscles are working by just feeling them. So as you're pedaling, if you dig your thumb into your glute on, say, the right side, and it's firm and it's active, and you can feel the muscle working.
You just kind of want this on, off, on, off, on, off of your glutes as you pedal.
Like if you feel that, then great. You dig your fingers into the left-hand side, and it's all floppy, and it's just squishy tissue, and nothing's happening, nothing's active. Then, you're missing out. That muscle's being lazy. Lazy? I don't like using that term. It's just not being active. So we could feel this with this rider. So we're definitely in a more quad dominant territory. So how do we get that rider accessing more of their posterior chain? You kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so in this case, a kind of assessment that we did off the bike showed that when this rider was squatting, there was minimal range of ankle dorsiflexion. Basically, all of the mobility was coming from the hip, rounding the spine to achieve a depth that was kind of not maybe where we kind of wanted to be. So the solution, if you like, two-pronged solution. The solution is going to be for this rider to improve their ankle mobility, amongst other things, and off the bike, so that they can access that movement pattern, heel on the floor when they kind of squat, which is essentially what happens when you come over the top of the pedal stroke. Your ankle is in a more dorsiflexed kind of position. So just for context, plantarflexed would be the opposite, which is pointing your toe down. Think ballet dancer. Dorsiflexed is the opposite, where the ankle is compressed. So you need to access a certain range of dorsiflexion if you want to ride a bike well, and certainly if you want to get on the power as you come over the top of the pedal stroke and be efficient. So we kind of knew this before from assessing this rider off the bike. So the strategy was, how do we get this heel of this rider on this left side engaged with the back of the shoe, so the rider has proprioception of the whole surface area, which will then trick their brain effectively into thinking that the whole foot is on the floor. Because your nervous system likes to know where you are. In yoga, we talk about being grounded a lot. And your body likes to know where it is in space. And if you're levitating, hooning around the lanes at 30, 40 odd kilometers an hour on your carbon fiber object, your body is like sending alarm bells because it does not know where it is in space. So it is vitally important for your foot to have connection through the whole of the shoe in order for you to access all of the muscle groups that we want to access to create good stability, good force production on the bike in a sustainable way. That was a bit of a long-winded one. So basically what we needed to do with this was get this gentleman's heel activated somehow. And the way we kind of did it was, first we tried some heel wedges, which didn't actually make that much of a difference on their own for this rider. There was a subtle change, but the riders still couldn't feel their heel with a solid connection through the back of the shoe. So then we tried a 4mm heel shim, or like a lift,
rise,
if you
lift,
like, a rise. So this essentially mimics what would happen if you were doing a squat with a barbell on your back and you stood on a plate to raise your heel higher than your toes, which is sometimes a good solution, often a good solution for those with limited ankle dorsiflexion range. Yeah. This coupled with the heel wedges, I think we ended up with 3.
Yeah.
3 1-degree wedges.
Yeah.
So there's 3 degrees of wedging, which went under the medial aspect of the heel, the inside. And that got this rider's heel connected to the bottom of the shoe. Yeah. And immediately, so where you were doing this fit, I was sat at the computer looking busy. Immediately, there was an audible difference in the way this gentleman was pedaling. And sometimes I'll poke my head around the computer screen if I hear something kind of that sounds different to how it has sounded. And this enabled that rider to better access their posterior chain. There was less chop in the pedal stroke, and visually, the foot had started to come into a flatter position throughout more of the pedal stroke.
Yeah, that heel suddenly found the floor, so it was air quotes, and so he was able to kind of keep that flatter foot. And he sat more centrally on the saddle as well. That was the other thing, and was starting to rock less on the saddle as well.
But the second thing that was interesting with this particular rider is that you could tell when there was a change in the posture. So even with all of this, you know, kind of like connective intervention in the bottom of the shoe to get that heel active, it got to the point where we could tell where the rider was looking just by listening to their pedaling. Yeah. So just for context, your head is the heaviest part of your body. Yeah. And if you're clever, it's going to be well heavy. And for every inch it moves forward, it doubles in weight, basically. So you've basically got a bowling ball on top of your shoulders, and for every inch you move your head forward, it doubles in weight. And if you think about how the modern world's set up, you're always looking at your phone, you're always looking down, you're always looking at your laptop, internally rotated shoulders, head gets heavier. And as soon as this chap looked up and extended his spine, and his head was sat neutral on top of his shoulders, his cadence increased, the sound of the pitch of the trainer got higher, and he started pedaling faster because it gave him access to more of this posterior chain because his head was neutral on his spine. He could extend through his spine and put his pelvis into a position where he could access these muscles and really connect through the pedal and that heel to access more power. He wasn't putting in any more effort. The gear was the same. It's just the position of his head and his posture through his spine and the position of his pelvis allowed him a little bit more power and a little bit more ease of generating that power, connection through the pedal. Basically, bike riding just got easier.
Yeah. And all you had to do was listen.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think as takeaways for our listeners here who are clearly tuned into their ears because they're listening to a podcast, use your ears when you are riding your indoor trainer and see if you can assess what's going on in your pedal stroke and what happens when you lift your head, you look forward. If you're looking at a screen, if you angle it a little bit too low, maybe you're looking a little bit lower, does that change your pedal stroke? If you put the screen a little bit higher, if you're looking at Zwift at head level, maybe that's an important thing if you're going to spend a lot of hours on the trainer. But also, think about that left-right balance in your pedal stroke. And correlate this to kind of how you feel on the bike. I think this time of year is a great opportunity for everyone to just get into that more reflective assessment kind of feel. Nobody's training for races really at the moment, unless you're doing cyclocross or you're living in the southern hemisphere. But for us here, we're deep into, starting winter training. And yeah, it's a period of reflection and reassessment. So yeah, see what you can find out. Be really interesting to see what you can find, and let us know. Let us know what you find out. And if you have any questions about it, what does this sound mean? Is it consistent? And what happens throughout your ride as well? What happens when you get tired? Does your pedal stroke get choppy? Everyone's heard of that phrase, pedaling squares. That is, stuff changes as you get tired. And so can you use this as another tool to see when you're getting tired, when you're losing form, and use that as an opportunity to assess kind of where you're at. Can you improve on that? You don't need the power output data to tell you all of these things. And getting yourself connected to the bike, I'd say, is probably one of the most important skill sets that you can master to become a better bike rider. Essentially, even all your data tools, all your technology is essentially trying to teach you how to listen to your body. Your heart rate monitor is giving you feedback on how hard you're working. But you kind of know how hard you're working because you can feel it, you can breathe it. But it's just giving you a little bit more context as to kind of where you're at.
And I think that's the important thing, is you have to put the data that your computer or your smart trainer is telling you into context. So if you can't utilize this sensory data and this sensory feedback through not only listening to the sound of your pedal stroke, but also listening to what your body's telling you, then you're likely missing a trick.
And it's really simple too. I'd say, just go give it a try. Assess your seat height. Go sit on the trainer, pedal away, think about it, listen to your pedal stroke, then change something. Drop the seat, 10 mil, see what happens. Does it get smoother? Does it get more connected? Yeah. And then make a decision. Maybe go back up again, reassess again. Does it go back to that more choppy pedal stroke, or does it get smoother as you go up? And this way, then you can start making assessments for yourself on how good your bike fit is. Could you benefit from going a little bit lower? What are the good things about it? Just listening and smoothness is just one aspect of your bike fit. But, you can prioritize certain aspects of your bike fit for certain disciplines, certain outcomes, and so on. So, yeah, give it a go, I'd say. You don't have to be like Matt and a pro musician. Everyone's got ears, and as a podcast listener, I'm sure you are well attuned. So, yeah, I'd like to know how you go. Any last words, Matt?
I think, as always, know thyself. And this is another way of getting to know thyself. Yeah. So, now's the time where we're not, there's no races on the horizon in the Northern Hemisphere, really, unless you're doing cross or, track league or whatever. So now's a good time to disconnect from the electronic stuff and, give yourself a bit more context and maybe spend, a little bit of time tapping into that sensory feedback. And, it's just another way that you can assess how you're interacting with the bike. And could it be better? Is it pretty good?
Yeah.
It's another way to give you that feedback.
Cool. All right, team. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.
If you made it to the end of this episode, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, do leave us a rating or review, as this really helps other riders find our podcast too, and motivates us to keep making more episodes. Thanks for your support, and catch you on the next one.
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.